42% of the phony GDP growth we saw last quarter came from the government's destructive Cash for Clunkers program.
And so here's a car that people own that they were driving without any payments. They didn't have any car loans on these clunkers. They owned them. Let's destroy that. Let's give you $4,500 to pour acid on the engine so it'll never work. And then we'll pay money to scrap it and all that. Who knows what it costs to actually get rid of each of these working cars. And let's encourage you to go buy a brand new car that you can't afford. And you're going to go into debt to do it. So now, every month, you have to make a car payment that you didn't have before. This is great. This is really how to get out of a recession, right? It's like we got shot in the arm, and so the solution is, well, let's shoot ourselves in the foot, too.
Cash for Clunkers was a Chinese program because they would not take our US dollars for their exports. We had to send them a bunch of metal and steel for them to give any type of credit to the US. A lot of people don't realize that. That was a brainchild of the Chinese embassy, not the US.
Cash for Clunkers isn't the government's only wasteful new program. They recently extended the home buyer's tax rebate, which credits a first-time home buyer, or somebody who hasn't owned a home in 3 years, $8,000 for buying a house. They are also giving out $6,500 to those who lived in their prior home for 5 years or more and now wish to buy a new home. Not only that, but if you can't afford to pay your mortgage, the government is now going to allow you to rent your home from Fannie Mae at a reduced rate in a new Deed for Lease program. The home buyer's tax rebate and Deed for Lease programs are designed to create artificial demand for houses and keep housing inventory off of the market. This is creating the false signal that the real estate market has bottomed and now is a good time to buy real estate. Unfortunately, Americans who buy real estate at this time will get slaughtered. The average U.S. home currently costs 20,000 ounces of silver. The last time the Federal Reserve rapidly increased its money supply back in the 1970s, we saw home prices fall from 20,000 ounces of silver down to a low of 2,000 ounces of silver. The bottom line is, if you invest in silver today instead of real estate, you might be able to afford a house 10 times nicer in 5 to 10 years. Most Americans today believe dollars are a safe asset because it has a number on it that always stays the same, while gold and silver's nominal prices can sometimes be very volatile. What's going to happen to the dollar when Americans wake up and realize it is actually the riskiest asset of all? Americans have come to accept inflation as being normal. They've learned from their parents that it was only 60 years ago when it cost 5 cents for a glass bottle of Coke, 5 cents for a pack of baseball cards, 5 cents for a Hershey chocolate bar, 15 cents for a burger at McDonald's, 16 cents for Kellogg's Corn Flakes, and 50 cents for a movie ticket. But they see nothing wrong with this because inflation occurred over a long period of time. It took 25 years for our national debt to double from $257 billion in 1950 to over $533 billion in 1975. Most recently, our national debt has more than doubled from $5.8 trillion in 2001 to its current level of over $12 trillion in just 8 years. Our national debt is now growing 3 times faster than it did decades ago, which means we should expect a very minimum of 3 times faster inflation. Therefore, if it took 60 years for a movie ticket price to rise from 50 cents to $7.50, it will most certainly rise to at least $112.50 within the next 20 years. And that's a best case scenario. Americans may not see much price inflation today because major U.S. banks are currently hoarding $860 billion in excess reserves. Congress passed legislation in late 2008 allowing the Federal Reserve to pay interest on the reserves banks keep parked at the Fed. However, as some of these banks begin to make loans, price inflation will increase to a level that is higher than the interest they collect. This will force the other banks to also make loans, and we will see a huge flood of dollars entering the system all at once.
I heard you talk about, you use pricing as a reference, and that purely printing more money doesn't cause inflation, which was really new news to me. And I wonder if you tell me what you think causes inflation.
Well, let's be clear what's going on. The Federal Reserve is not putting money out into the economy. What we're doing is we're creating bank reserves. That's money that the banks hold with the Fed. So it's just sitting there idly. It's not chasing any goods. Okay? So as long as those bank reserves are sitting idly, broader measures of money that measure the circulation of money.
But it won't sit there idly forever. The purpose of it is not to sit there idly forever. And while there may be a time lapse, certainly, unless that money gets sucked back in and out of circulation, it's going to cause inflation. There's no denying it.
If it's not sucked back in, but as I was describing, we have ways of sucking it back in.
How?
Well, one way to do it is by raising the interest rate we pay on those reserves, which induces banks to keep the money with us instead of lending it out or circulating it through the economy.
To counteract the inflation of the 1970s, the Federal Reserve needed to raise interest rates in 1980 to 21.5%. With interest rates currently being held at an artificially low level of 0% for an extended period of time, artificially high interest rates of 21.5% or more will once again be needed to counteract the damage being done today. In 2009, the U.S. government spent $383 billion on interest payments to holders of our national debt. Considering that most of our national debt is now made up of short-term T-bills, if we see the Federal Reserve raise interest rates to 21.5%, our interest payments could grow to over $2.58 trillion when our entire government tax receipts in 2009 were only $2.185 trillion. It will be impossible for Obama to meet his budget projection and cut the deficit in half from $1.6 trillion in 2009 to $761 billion in 2012. Most likely by 2012, we will be looking at $3 or $4 trillion budget deficits or more. Therefore, the trend of accelerating national debt growth is likely to continue, and the next doubling of our debt could actually occur in 4 years, which means we could see our $112 movie ticket within the next 5 to 10 years. But that's only if the Chinese are dumb enough to keep lending us their money. Most likely, the Chinese will stop lending us their money and just allow the dollar to collapse.